Near the beginning of Charles Dickens' famous book, A Christmas Carol, it says of Ebenezer Scrooge that he was tight-fisted. Tight-fisted. In other words, Ebenezer Scrooge had plenty of money, but he kept it tight in his fist, and he would not give any of it away. Well, as we know later in the story, Scrooge changes, and he becomes generous with his money and gives much of it away. But there are some people, and perhaps you may be one of them, who have the idea that God is tight-fisted. That God is somehow reluctant to give good things. I've occasionally heard people say things like, well, I don't believe in God because I asked him to give me something and he didn't do it. And perhaps you have asked God for certain things and he hasn't given them. And you feel resentful about that. And it's left you with the impression that God is mean and withholds things from us and doesn't really want us to have a good time. I want to just take a few minutes this evening to show that such an idea of God could not be further from the truth. After all, a wise parent doesn't give their child everything that they ask for Christmas. And God does not give his people, or to any people, everything that they ask for. But he does give something greater than we can fully take in. There is a place in the Bible, John chapter 3, verse 16, where it says that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And from these words, let's just briefly think about the goodness of God. God's goodness is seen in that he gave something. It's nice, isn't it, to receive gifts at this time of year, but there's something even better than receiving gifts, isn't there? And that is to give them. Jesus once said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And God is to receive our love and our thanks and our praise, and he's to receive those things because of what he has given. And God delights to give good things. And he does so because of his love. God so loved the world that he gave. And some gifts are especially precious to you because they were given to you with great love. Well, God in his goodness and love has given something to the world. So God's goodness is seen in that he gave something. And then God's goodness is seen in what it was that he gave. God gives many good gifts. And John mentioned that when he prayed earlier. For example, Jesus once said that God causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. There's another place in the Bible where we read of a man called Paul visiting a place called Lystra and saying to the people that God has shown kindness by giving you rain from heaven and crops in their seasons. He provides you with plenty of food and fills your hearts with joy. So God gives good gifts to people who love him and to people who don't. To people who think about him and thank him and to people who don't. But this verse that we're thinking about speaks of God's greatest gift. God so loved the world that he gave his Son. That's the great wonder that we think about and sing about At Christmas time, and the Christians rejoicing throughout the whole year, that God gave his son. When the angel Gabriel told Mary that she was going to have a son, he said to her, "You will be with child and give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus. The Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God." And this was an amazing gift for God to give. And it was an amazing thing for God the Son to do, to come into this world as a man, as a baby. And remarkably, God gave this gift. He gave his son to a world that's turned its back upon him. To a world that's decided to go its own way. He gave his son to a world that does not deserve such a gift. One of the carols we sang, "See Amid the Winter Snow," picks up on this. When it says of God's Son coming into the world, thus to come from highest bliss down to such a world as this. To such a world as this. The world was no different then to what it is now. Yes, technology and transport and things like that are very different now, but the world then, like the world today, was a world of wars and crime and family problems and so on. And God gave his son to this world with all of its problems. And God's son came into this world. Jesus was born and grew up and lived in a world like this. So God's goodness is seen in that he gave something, and God's goodness is seen in what it was that he gave. He gave his son. But then God's goodness is seen in the reason he gave it. In the reason he gave his son. Why did God do this? Why did God give his son to the world? Well, we could say that God gave his son to teach the world. Hundreds of years earlier, a man called Isaiah looked forward to this gift that God would give and said of Jesus Christ that he is the wonderful counselor. None of us know it all, do we? We sometimes foolishly try to give the impression that we do, but none of us know it all. And at many points in our lives, we don't know where to turn. We don't know what to do. Don't know how to behave. Jesus is a wonderful counselor. In the Bible, he shows us the way to go. Or we can say that God gave his son to be a light in the world. I'm sure we can all agree, can't we, that there's much darkness in the world. Events happen in different parts of the world, and news reporters say things like, "Yesterday was a dark day for the people of this place." Or when a particularly evil deed is done, people talk about dark forces being at work. But if we think about that more carefully, if we bring it closer to home, then things become quite uncomfortable for all of us, don't they? Because don't we all have dark thoughts at different times? When somebody upsets us, we lie awake at night thinking about them. Are we not ashamed sometimes at the dark thoughts we can have? Well, I never actually do it, we might say, but our deeds begin as a thought. So, some years ago, a newspaper invited its readers to write in and say what is wrong with the world. And lots of people wrote in with lots of different answers. And one wise man wrote in and said this: what's wrong with the world? I am. There's much darkness in the world. There's much darkness in our own hearts. But just before saying that Jesus would be a wonderful counselor, Isaiah said of his coming that the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Jesus Christ is a light that shines in the darkness, a light for us to follow through the darkness of our lives in this world. So God gave his Son to teach the world. God gave his Son to be a light to the world. But most of all, we see in this verse that God gave his Son to save the world. This world has turned its back upon God and decided to go its own way, and to ignore the Maker's instructions always has consequences. I guess that all of us, or almost all of us, have had the experience, haven't we, of ordering some flat pack furniture, and when it comes, you just want to get it assembled, don't you? You just want to get it assembled and up as quickly as possible. And there's a great temptation, isn't there, to just discard the instructions, or just glance at them and then get on with putting it together. And I imagine that most of us know from experience that it doesn't go well when you try to do that. The instructions are in the box for a reason. And God, who made the world, has told us how to live in the world. And yet we ignore his instructions. Or we just give them a passing glance, and it doesn't go well. And because the world has ignored God and his instructions, it's a perishing world, heading towards the judgment and punishment of God upon sin. That is our failure to obey him and live in his way. And yet, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. And God's Son, Jesus Christ, the babe born in Bethlehem, he grew up and lived a perfect life in this world, always following God's instructions. And though he lived such a life, when he was about 33 years old, he died nailed to a cross. And when he died on the cross, he took the judgment and punishment of God that sin deserves, in order to save people from that judgment and punishment. He then rose again on the third day and returned to heaven. He said that one day he will come again, not as a baby born in a place like Bethlehem, but as a great king, to bring justice and judgment and take those whom he has saved to be with him in a new world where everything is good. Eternal life. God gave his Son to the world. And whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. That's how you receive this great gift that God has given. So you receive Jesus Christ and the benefits of his death on the cross by believing in him. That means to admit to him that you've gone wrong and sinned against God, and to ask him and trust him to save you and to give you eternal life. God is not mean. God is not tight-fisted. God has given the greatest gift that could ever be given. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life.